Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are in room 355 for the 2:30 talk, all the way from Rio, Brazil, software developer Bia with her presentation, Observability Driven Development.
Hi, just testing. Okay. Hello, I'm super thrilled to be here at PyCon, and I'm going to talk about observability-driven development, or more like invite you a little bit to think about observability before things start to crash in production. I hope you've all been there. It's a fun ride when things start to crash in production. So first, just like I've been presented, I'm Bianca. I'm also known as Bia. I'm from Brazil, from Rio more specifically, which is like amazing city, beautiful. If you ever wanna meet Rio, it's gonna be amazing. And we have an amazing Python community in Rio too. We used to have meetings every last Saturday of the month before the pandemic. So at some point, we're gonna resume all the meetings and hopefully get back to a more active community. And right now, I'm building something new at a startup called Lumos. My focus is engineering, but we are like this super tiny startup. It's still on stealth mode, and we work around the field of productivity, identity, and compliance. You're gonna hear from us soon, hopefully. And previously, I worked at Red Hat, building a platform for welfare ed systems, and at Stone, which is like a Brazilian fintech. And most of the time, I was working as a backend developer, DevOps engineer, sometimes leading small teams, sometimes doing a little bit of management, but that wasn't for me, so I came back to an IC role. So again, like before I dive too deep, I want to talk about I like all things DevOps, CI/CD, cloud infrastructure, observability. I also like Go a lot. I'm a Go developer, just like I am a Python developer. I'm still a World of Warcraft player. I grew up playing Pokemon and Ragnarok during countless nights. I'm passionate about coffee and beer. And I used to listen to a lot of rock and roll, but nowadays I go and I listen to pop and reggaeton, so I don't know what happened. I think it's the 30s catching up with me. And I like web, distributed systems architecture, and Python, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here at PyCon. First question is why do we develop software? Why are we software developers? I know that some of us think that's this is gonna be just a job, but even if it is, why do we have that job? Why is there a need in the market for that? Why is it such in high demand? There are many possible answers to that, but one that I particularly like is that people need it or people want it. People are the users of our software, the end users. We can have a lot of discussion of whether this software is gonna benefit our society or not. But even if it's something super silly, like a game or not, people are gonna use it, and you want people to use it. So someone's needs have to be met. And software needs to meet someone's expectations. Even in machine learning, so when you don't interact with it directly, you do want something out of it. You want your software to learn something and give you a particular output. When you're just studying, you want to get something out of it. And what happens when that expectation isn't met? It's a bit hard to manage. Sometimes a user wants to load a web page and it can't. A user expect to do something and they just can't. They just couldn't do it because software crashes sometimes. And not meeting expectations generates a lot of frustration. And in business, that means money loss. We lose money because we're not meeting our users' expectations. So normally, there's frustration, and we enter the problem-solving mode and start putting out fires. And normally, there's a bug in production, the developer goes crazy, goes insane, and tries to fix it right away, especially when it's a P01 bug. And we often realize that we don't have enough data. We think of observability way too late, when there's a problem that is already happening and it's already hard to figure out what's going on. So this is sort of an open invitation to live fight or flight mode, the anxious moment where you have to fix everything. super fast because it's broken. And think about this like beforehand. What can we do when we're just starting, when we are just creating our POC or MVP or studying our app? What can we do so that when it reaches production, it is easier for us to figure out what's going on? So I'm going to go through APM logging tools and setting up your application. A small problem, I'm going to talk about good logging practices, and a slight more complex performance issue. I have to fix that slide. and finding the root cause of that problem. First, like when I talk about observability, I think one of the first things that come to my mind when my background's mostly around backend development focused to web, is that we need an APM logging tool and set up an app. Most of those solutions come with both, so it's fine to choose like one tool or a combination of two. There are some famous ones over there. We have Elastic with Elasticsearch, we have New Relic, we have Datadog, we have Honeycomb, we have Lightstep, we have Splunk. Like, I use the couple over my jobs, my career. I don't have like a preference, and I don't work for any of these companies. So I also I actually chose New Relic because it's the one that I have more experience, but I don't like a particular preference. It really depends on your use case, and you have to go through the functionalities. And if you want something to think about and consider, like there's OpenTelemetry, which I highly consider if you like open source, if you wanna like something that is not gonna lock you into a particular vendor. OpenTelemetry is gonna be like a collection of tools, export telemetry data, and that telemetry data is gonna go from your app to a solution. So New Relic can consume data from OpenTelemetry, Datadog can probably do the same, Elastic can probably do the same, so you can just learn how to have that data exported in a format that is famous and known by tools. Like I said, New Relic for that example. The reasoning, like more experience, and I didn't want to learn something new just to present here. I'm anxious enough just without learning something new, so let's not do that. And I came up with the most boring example app that I'm letting you can come up with. So I am gonna open that app, and I wanna go through it and show how New Relic set up on it. So let me do that here. This is our example app, and New Relic set up here through, I have a main.py over there, and you just import New Relic agent to your app, and you initialize it and register. When you do that in your application, New Relic's like gonna be plugged and gonna look at all of the function calls that you have in your app. It's gonna inspect your application when it's running in production mode. One thing that I say, there's no reason to not do that when you're just starting an app, like with New Relic or another tool, because it's like 4 lines of code sometimes. So we don't do that because no, we want to do it faster, but we end up with less data in production. So here we have a Flask app, very simple one, non-production ready code, don't copy that. And I also created a database here, populated a schema. There are a couple of things here. And when I run like Docker and Compose here, like if I run here, Docker Compose up, this application is gonna be up and running. If you're curious like about other things that I have here, it's gonna be on GitHub, so you can go through later. And I'm gonna just make a request to make sure it's working. I'm gonna bring that here. Just have to figure out the whole monitor setup because options. Move it over there. So here, like, we have a different kind of postman, which is Insomnia. I really like too, so if you ever want to try it out, you can do a health check on our app. We can create a new task. I have a cat. His name is Marcelinho. Sometimes I bought like a leash for him, and I go out with him. It's funny. He has a TikTok. So I can create a task to go out with Marcelinho, and there are a couple of things that my app can do. It's just a to-do list, like it's a very simple one. And like I said, we have a new Relic setup, so I'm gonna move that to a new window, and also move that. Yeah. So whenever there's a new request, I just sent one. A new Relic's just gonna look through my app, and it's an instrumentation platform. You can see like all the requests that happen, transactions. Like, okay, there was a patch, there was a list task, there was a create task here. Error rate, success, slowest trace, which is amazing. One thing that I really like is service maps. So if it makes external calls like to a service or Postgres database, has everything here. But I don't work for New Relic, so hope they give me swags after this. And it also shows logs, like something that is really cool too. Like you can have like info endpoint hit. You can have your log here with a couple of cool things. And let's go back to presentation now. So problem is, what happens like if a user tries to add a task without a description, something like that? Let's try that. I'm gonna try to create a task here without a description, like just empty body. I know that normally you want to check for that, the user is gonna get the feedback, but what if you forgot, like something happened? User got internal server error. It's complaining, I cannot create my task. You suck, you're a bad developer. I'm not gonna sign up for your to-do list anymore. And when you look at the logs, you just say like, exception. Okay, exception. Could not create. What happened? Like, how can I make that user happy again? How can I let them know that, oh, okay, what happened is that you tried to create a task without description. I had a problem. I didn't create my API in a way that you would have a good feedback about it. So how can I make this better to actually give a good feedback to my user? We can add logs. That's what's missing, like logging. When we talk about like good logging practices, this is like a thing that I really like and I'm very passionate about. So if you ever want to talk about it, DM me on Twitter. Let's talk. I have my very own definition of what's good logging, but like I didn't dream about it and like okay, it's a personal, opinionated, but also very backed up with researches and open to discussions. So if you think that I'm talking about something that is not really, you don't really agree, let's chat about it, let's fight about it. I'm happy to do so. When I talk about logging, I like plain text messages without variables. So when you look at the logging message that has a variable, it's very nice for you to see like, okay, a task was created with an ID X. Awesome. But if you want to group these log messages in a tool like Splunk or New Relic or Elasticsearch, like you should write those logs for a computer to process it, not for a human to read. But also make it so that a human can read and understand. So your log messages should be like plain text messages. You should be able to group it, and you should be able to actually like give me all log messages with that message. I'm gonna have like a sum of all operations of task creators that I have in my app, if I just do that. But also should have enough information for humans to read. So how can we, like, with plain text messages without putting the task ID, how can I get that information? Well, you use extra fields. So you take off the variables of messages, you have something called extra fields that Python standard logging library has. And you can use those. You can add like a big dictionary of variables that are important for that log message. You put as much info as you can. Don't abuse it in the sense that you're gonna send like this huge payload. But these fields are normally hidden by the default view, and they're extremely useful. So you like put as much info as you can, like what customer, what is the request ID, all of that. And speaking of request ID, traceability. We should have like for every web request, we should have a unique identifier for it. And this unique identifier should be present in all of our log messages that are related to that request in order to be able to trace exactly what happened in a particular request. So I've found myself a couple of times with a JSON payload and going through my code to understand where the heck this code broke because I have absolutely no idea. And I had to like go through, read all of the ifs and else and everything to see what would happen. So if I had a request identifier, I would be able to like, and good logging, I would be able to see every single thing that happened. Like I just get the same identifier and get all the messages with that one. I can see every single thing that happened. So it's amazing. And also business traceability. Like what happened with that customer? What's going on with that customer? What's the kind of thing that they use in our app? So it's something that is really nice to have too, like customer identifiers to exist in all log requests in order to measure the experience of a particular customer. You can also like create a particular SLA for a subset of customers that you have. So how do you figure out like, okay, what is the time that a particular request took for a particular customers? You can do that like through logging. Keeping track of IDs is something that I really like too. Like every time that I save an object, I write a log line about it. And I also keep the ID as an extra field. Like this allows like easy inspection, like if I have to ever go through like my database and see like, okay, was that really added? What's going on with that data? Is everything okay? So it gives me like a really good overview of things. And the last thing is that we normally go like writing log lines, just whatever, just gonna go log info everything. We should be more intentional about logging levels. Like, you should know what kind of information you wanna see while developing, what kind of information is only useful for production. My rule of thumb is that error is something to pay attention, like I should worry. Info is extra info in production environment, and the bug's just made for my local development. That is like my rule of thumb, but you can also have like different rules across your teams. Like it's very particular. But I think that you should be very, very intentional. And like, how can we apply this to like our problem? Like, how can we literally like get these things that I just said and make our customer happy with the task that was created without the description? So there's a cool thing about using a log handler or a library that is already established, that most of the things like request ID, traceability are already set up for us. So if you look at that log line here that I showed before, like there is like a trace ID here. I'm gonna make it bigger so you don't suffer too much. There's a trace ID here. So New Relic is already, there's a little log handler that is kind of an adapter of Python's log handler that does that. So there are a couple of things that are already here, like file name, where the exception happened, a couple of things that are already like free for us. That is happening because of, let me open my to-do list app. That is happening because here in our Logger API, make that bigger, we're using a New Relic log handler that is actually imported from New Relic libraries. So this is something that I don't have to worry about when using Flask and New Relic because it's already like for free set up for me. But we talked about like, okay, we lost some information, so how can we add that here and have more info? We can add some logs. So when I create a task, by we were creating, right? So we can just come over here. We have a logger here. And I can just say like logger.info, creating task. And we said like, let's use extra fields instead of putting variables here. And I'm gonna make sure that when creating a task, I'm logging my body. So JSON. Okay, we can have that here. And other than that, like when I save a task, I also like doing the task created. Instead of doing like task created with ID, I just do task created. And then I come here, I would task ID. And I can do task.id. And like in the case of an exception, you could do like logger exception and add your message. And we're tempted to do this, aren't we? Could not create task, please. And your exception can be an extra field. Like, I really feel like this makes it a lot easier for us to understand where the exception came from, because you can see like, okay, that was what happened when that error in particular happened. Otherwise, you would have to have like very specific exceptions for every single thing that happened, so you could see good errors over there. I think this has auto reload with Unicorn, so I can probably, if the demo gods are with me today, if they're not. Yeah, I don't think they are. Oh, okay, yeah, because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to write Python anymore. And you see, like, name is not defined. I have to, like, do that. Okay. Let's see if it's good now. Wow, it's taking a while. It did take a internal server error. Maybe I do want to log that as an error instead of an exception. Oh no, I think that's good. That is okay. Let's see the log lines here. Let's see if we have something new. We should. Yes. So smaller a little bit. So we do have like the same exception that we had before, because it still like raised an exception over there, but we have a message before. And these two messages, also I have my error message, and I can see, oh, okay, description violates not null constraint, because the customer didn't give me a description. So I can create a bug, I can fix that now, and I can actually understand what happened. And the trace ID here is also equal to the trace ID over there. So, oops, let's go to F. It's supposed to be like equal to this trace ID, is supposed to be equal to that one. So you can actually like look through all log messages with that trace ID, and that should give you a good idea of what happened with that particular customer, which is super cool. So okay, first thing we solved. And did I forget something? Yeah, we did plain text, we added extra fields, new Relic log handler gave us a little bit more traceability, we kept track of the IDs, we used like roughly the right log levels, because those are logs that I care about in a production environment. I could add even more logs if I wanted more information in development mode. So when we get like to a slightly more complex performance issue, like, okay, I update a task and it's gonna be fine. You're gonna see that. And here, okay, updated that task and it's fine. But if I update like a bunch of tasks, it's gonna be extra slow. So New Relic is gonna give us like tracing data for that, like extra slow. I'm doing something very wrong, very wrong. So if you look at traces, like here you're gonna have a couple of trace transactions, slow transactions. Didn't show yet, but I do have one that is already. I have a backup link here. You can open. And it really shows like by segment, like the duration of thing that I did. And I really did something very common when we do patches that I did one at a time. So I do 100 selects on Postgres, I do 50 updates, a couple of rollbacks, and I called the logger API for 50 times for every log line that I did, like updating tasks. So I really did that, and New Relic is giving me like the time, the duration, all of that, which is something that APMs really do. And once you learn how to read that, performance issues get like super easy to fix on your app. I am not gonna have time to code the actual thing that is gonna fix that, but there is a branch here, like I'm gonna share that, move to new window. There are a couple of problems here. One of them, like we said, like Postgres was actually, we're adding a select and an update for each task. So actually updating your patch to do a bulk save would be like the thing to fix here. So we get many instead of getting just one. We do a bulk save here that also fixed the 50 updates, and we do just one update on Postgres, which is awesome. And for the log, for the calling the log New Relic logger a couple of times, we're still gonna call the API 50 times, but we could make it async. So I actually made the log handler asynchronous by creating a sync New Relic log handler. So the response is gonna come back to the user, the response time is gonna be lower, and the log is gonna be sent to New Relic in a different async IO loop. So I'm gonna open that PR and leave it right there if you wanna check in a little bit. And let me go back to the presentation. We found the root cause, it was nice. I once had this problem, and I had to process like roughly 8 million messages a day and write to a Firestore database. We had like a couple of transactions, like 132 per second. And that was a performance issue because it was supposed to be real time. New Relic showed really easily to me that my issue, my bottleneck, was a commit on Firestore. So that was like a real case where Firestore, I was doing a bunch of updates on Firestore and doing like too many commits. And that took a lot of time. When I saw that on New Relic, I was able to do a bulk update on Firestore. And that brought it up my performance to like 8 times faster. And it was like great. It was one of the best feelings like in my life. I think that's because I'm a nerd. So in this particular problem, it took us like 2 months to solve this because we just didn't have the data. So always developer POCs with good logging practice, APM monitoring, even if turned on by a flag. They often grow too fast, and observability becomes an issue faster than we are able to foresee. So thank you. Follow me on Twitter for random things in English, Portuguese, sometimes Spanish. I answer DMs very, very slow, but I always try. Slides are here, codes are here. Thank you so much. It was great talking here.